the Jacksonville mastermind behind what was the largest cash heist in U.S. history.
The second biggest heist in U.S. history, right here in Charlotte.
What turns an ordinary armored truck driver into the mastermind behind a $17 million heist? For David Ghant, it wasn't just greed or ambition. Imagine being stuck in a job that pays you just $8.15 an hour, a job that requires you to handle millions of dollars in cash every day, yet feeling like your life is going nowhere. What do you do when someone offers you a chance to change all that with one daring move? This is the story of how a simple joke spiraled into the second largest cash robbery in US history. The man behind the money, David Ghant. Meet David Ghant, a veteran of the Gulf War and now a vault supervisor at Loomis Fargo, a man whose life perfectly embodies the concept of mundanity. Every day, he wakes up at the crack of dawn, drags himself to work, and spends hours surrounded by mountains of cash. Calling this mundane may seem inaccurate, but David had long ago been desensitized by these unique surroundings, likely by the fact that these stacks of cash that formed them were off-limits to him, while he made a mere $8.15 an hour. Ghant's routine is a cruel joke played by life itself. He arrives at Loomis Fargo facility, punches in, and begins his shift. The vault door swings open, revealing stacks upon stacks of crisp bills. He counts them, organizes them, and prepares them for transport. All the while, his own wallet remains comparatively light. Beneath Ghant's unassuming exterior, frustration is brewing, perhaps understandably. Despite $8.15 an hour, or $16.22 today, being well above the minimum wage of the time of $5.15, it just isn't enough. He has a wife and a daughter who are not only living in a mobile home, but do so without spending much time with David, who works 80 hours a week. And on top of that, he's drowning in credit card debt that he can't pay. But still, David remains a law-abiding citizen and does his job. Until... Enter Kelly Campbell, a co-worker who's about to turn Ghant's world upside down. When she walks into the break room one day, Ghant can't help but feel a spark of something he hasn't felt in years. Hope. The two developed a friendship, and allegedly, later, a romantic relationship in their shared workspace. Today starts innocently enough, though. They're chatting over lukewarm coffee, as they often do. Then Kelly drops a joke. You know, with all that money sitting there, we could probably retire to a beach in Mexico. This didn't come out of nowhere. Other company that Campbell kept was that of Steve Chambers, a small-time crook who was aware of Campbell's job and suggested it. Kelly had decided to stealthily share this plan with her friend/romantic interest, hoping for an accomplice but not yet committed to the plan. As the days pass, that offhand comment festers in Ghant's thoughts. He finds himself daydreaming about what life could be like if he just took some of that money. No one would miss a few thousand, right? But why stop there? Why not dream bigger? These thoughts had obviously occurred to Ghant before, naturally, but this moment with Campbell seemed to be the straw that broke the camel's back, bringing those thoughts into focus. Ghant starts to see his job in a whole new light. Every security protocol, every camera blind spot, every shift change, it all becomes part of an elaborate puzzle. As a vault supervisor, he has all the expertise he needs to rob the place. But Ghant isn't a criminal mastermind. He's a desperate man with access to millions and a dangerous idea. He and Kelly are playing with fire, and they don't even realize how badly they're about to be burned. The perfect crime, more or less. Over several months, Ghant, Kelly Campbell, and Steve Chambers meticulously craft their audacious scheme. With Ghant's insider knowledge, they believe they hold all the cards. Ghant, our man on the inside, goes to work as normal, but this time dismisses the employee he's been training early. He disables 2 security cameras watching the vault before his accomplices, Kelly, Steve, and several others, arrive. They get to work with the difficult job of loading 2,700 pounds, or 1.2 metric tons of cash into bags, which they take back to a company van. obviously not all at once, and load up. Ghant then takes the vault keys and sets the vault timer to not be opened for about 3 days after they left. The original plan for David to flee to Mexico with $50,000, the largest amount he could bring across the border in cash, goes badly as they arrive at the Colombian Metropolitan Airport, which is closed. They swiftly think of a plan B, and David takes a bus to Atlanta, which goes well, and Ghant makes it, while Chambers and Campbell are left counting their haul. In total, they took about $17.3 million, which Steve, the resident crook, needs to launder and distribute to the rest in a way that won't get them discovered. In the meantime, Ghant just needs to lay low while Steve sends the remaining money over in small amounts, and eventually, once the coming storm that results from their heist dies down, he can finally return home. The law. Unraveling the perfect crime. The day after the heist, the employees at Loomis Fargo, unable to access the vault, call the police, and the investigation starts. They begin scanning around for evidence, and to be honest, they had a tough time ahead of them. Literally nothing to go on. If only there weren't 2 cameras watching the vault, but 3. A third one that could literally record David Ghant in an identifiable way as he loaded the cash. Oh wait, that's exactly what happened. But there's more. Just 2 days after the heist, the FBI stumbled upon the mastermind's abandoned van, packed with $3.3 million in cash and the remaining camera tapes that Ghant had removed. Unfortunately, however, Ghant was in Mexico and not easily findable. If only the accomplices still in the US would go and do something even more conveniently stupid. A new life. Sudden wealth syndrome. Ever wonder what happens when you give millions to people who've never had more than a few hundred in their bank accounts? The answer involves a velvet Elvis, a patriotic bulldog statue, and a spectacularly ill-timed question to a bank teller. While David Ghant was soaking up the Mexican sun, his accomplices back home were about to give a masterclass in how not to lay low after stealing millions. It seemed they let it get to their heads, and it didn't even bother trying to launder anything. Let's focus on Stephen and Michelle Chambers, our unlikely nouveau riche couple. One day, they're living in a modest trailer. The next, they're moving into a luxury mansion in a gated community. But instead of quietly settling in, they announced their arrival with all the subtlety of a fireworks display. The Chambers went on a spending spree that would make even the most extravagant lottery winners blush. They dropped tens of thousands on outrageous furnishings. A velvet Elvis painting, check. A bulldog statue dressed like George Patton, absolutely. It's like they were playing interior design bingo with the most bizarre items they could find. Michelle Chambers, in a moment of apparent temporary insanity, walked into a bank and asked the teller, quote, "How much can I deposit before you have to report it to the feds?" End quote. Do I need to point out the flaw in that particular source for that information? Meanwhile, Stephen was cruising around in a brand new BMW Z3. Their spending habits were so outrageous that they earned themselves a nickname in the media, the Kramer Mountain Hillbillies. Why yes, a textbook tactic after executing a massive illegal heist. Spend so outrageously that you become a minor celebrity. Why didn't I think of that? Dr. Sarah Johnson, a psychologist specializing in sudden wealth syndrome, which I think we all long to have, explains, quote, "When people come into large sums of money unexpectedly, it can trigger a kind of psychological short circuit. The brain's reward center goes into overdrive, leading to impulsive decisions and a sense of invincibility." End quote. Think about it. One day you're counting pennies for groceries, the next you're ordering breast implants and luxury cars like you're picking items off a fast food menu. The temptation to indulge in all the things you've always wanted but could never afford can be overwhelming. But, as you might expect, their dream of infinite wealth eventually turned into a nightmare. Consequences. As the FBI dug deeper, they employed a range of sophisticated techniques. Financial forensics experts combed through transaction records, while behavioral analysis built psychological profiles of the possible suspects. The investigation took a predictable turn when the FBI noticed some odd spending habits from Steve Chambers and his wife, seeming to coincide with the heist. Warrants for wiretaps were predictably approved and provided real-time insights into the increasingly panicked conversations between Chambers, Ghant, and Campbell. It was like listening to a crime drama unfold, with each call bringing them closer to cracking the case. The Bureau's approach was a delicate dance of surveillance and strategy. Informants whispered secrets, cameras captured telling moments, and slowly but surely, the net tightened around the hapless band of thieves. As pressure mounted, cracks began to show in the criminal's facade. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of Ghant's desperate phone call from Mexico. After all this time, Chambers hadn't sent over any money, and Kelly Campbell hadn't joined him in the country as planned. Unaware that the FBI was listening, he reached out to Chambers for answers. This led to a coordinated operation that saw Ghant in handcuffs, and the rest of the gang's dreams of wealth and freedom shattered. The House of Cards collapses. Betrayal and arrest. Picture this, Ghant, alone in a foreign country, his dreams of lavish lifestyle crumbling around him as he runs through the meager $25,000 he's brought with him. He reaches out to Steve Chambers, hoping for a lifeline, but Chambers has already set a sinister plan in motion. Instead of sending help, he hires a hitman to eliminate Ghant, intending to keep the stolen millions all to himself. The hitman, upon meeting Ghant, has an unexpected change of heart. Instead of carrying out the hit, he befriends his intended target. A very boring twist to what could have been a very entertaining part of the story. But moving on. On March 2nd, 1998, the House of Cards finally collapses. In a coordinated multi-state operation, the FBI swoops in. Chambers, his wife, and several co-conspirators are arrested in Charlotte, just a day after Ghant's capture in Mexico. It's a domino effect that brings down the entire amateur network. The Reckoning. Justice, consequences, and lessons learned. The courtroom drama of the Loomis Fargo heist was about to unfold, and with it, a stark reality check for all involved. As the defendants filed in, the weight of their actions hung heavy in the air. The perfect plan had crumbled, and now it was time to face the consequences. In total, 24 individuals found themselves on the wrong side of the law. 8 were directly involved in the robbery, while 16 others played supporting roles. The sentences handed down varied wildly, reflecting the complex nature of the crime and each participant's involvement. David Ghant, the inside man, received 7.5 years behind bars, but served only 5 before parole. Kelly Campbell, another key player, faced a similar fate. Both were also slapped with massive restitution orders. Ghant owed $3.81 million, while Campbell's debt soared to $4.7 million. Stephen Chambers, the self-proclaimed mastermind, spent 11 years behind bars. The aftermath of the heist revealed a fatal flaw in their perfect plan: human nature itself. The FBI's investigation uncovered a pattern of behavior that would make any criminal mastermind cringe. Many of the defendants couldn't resist the allure of luxury cars, cosmetic surgery, and other lavish purchases. As the dust settled on the trials, the true cost of the heist became apparent. Families were torn apart, with children growing up without parents and spouses struggling to make ends meet. Careers were irreparably damaged, leaving many defendants with limited options upon release. The emotional toll was immeasurable, with relationships strained to the breaking point. Compared to the sentences for similar white-collar crimes, the Loomis Fargo defendants faced relatively stiff penalties. The sheer scale and audacity of the heist seemed to warrant a stronger response from the justice system. For Ghant, life after prison has been a stark contrast to the beachside dreams that initially lured him into the scheme. He's traded vault codes for construction tools, and his Hollywood moment came not as a wealthy ex-con, but as a consultant for Masterminds, a film based on the heist. A comedy film. Conclusion. The Loomis Fargo heist reveals how financial stress and opportunity can push ordinary people into crime. David Ghant's position as a vault supervisor became both his golden ticket and his downfall. This case didn't just shock the FBI, it changed the game. Security protocols were overhauled, and investigation techniques evolved. The Bureau learned to look beyond the obvious, digging deeper into the psychology of desperation. So, how about you? Ask yourself, how far would you go if millions were within reach? If you ever find yourself in that position, I have a word of advice. Double-check the number of security cameras, and make sure your co-conspirators aren't susceptible to sudden wealth syndrome.